2K downloads, and we have been downloaded in every single continent besides Antarctica, of course. So I want to thank all of Wi-Fi Matters' amazing listeners like you for supporting us. This has just really been an amazing ride, an amazing journey, and thank you so much for listening and supporting Wi-Fi Matters. It truly does mean a lot. So now that our back to school series has come to a close for now, I am so excited for this episode because we will be hearing from Angela Zhang, a rising senior from LA who is the founder of ArtVocacy, where art meets advocacy. I'm so excited to speak with Angela. I actually met her, or I heard her speak at Gen Z GirlCon, and I really enjoyed her speech, and I thought it would be super cool for you guys to sort of hear about everything that she's been doing and hear from her. So I can't wait to talk to Angela about everything and where she gets her inspiration from and how she started this nonprofit and how entrepreneurship ties in with advocacy. I hope you enjoyed the interview. Hi, Angela. Thank you so much for coming on Wi-Fi Matters. I am personally super excited to have you on the show today because I found your speech at Gen Z GirlCon to be so interesting and fantastic. So thank you so much for coming on Wi-Fi Matters today.
Thank you. I am so glad to be here. I am so very much excited and really thankful that you found me on Gen Z GirlCon. Gen Z GirlCon was an absolutely amazing experience.
Yeah.
And, I'm so grateful and so excited to be here.
Yeah, so let's get into the interview. So first, tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself and like what you like to do and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hi everyone. My name is Angela Zhang. As you all know, I am a 16-year-old artivist from Los Angeles. I currently attend the Geffen Academy at UCLA. We're part of first graduating class, which is an exciting experience. Yeah. And I am the founder and currently executive director of ArtVocacy, where art meets advocacy. And ArtVocacy is a youth-led platform that shines light on issues that matter through the creative arts.
That's great. You are so interesting and you're doing all of this really amazing things. So let's talk more about those things. So I guess first of all, what got you interested in art?
Yeah, I love that question because I don't think I get asked that a lot. I think it's more of, the activism part, but I actually did start off everything with art. So I had always, okay, so this is a little anecdote, but in Chinese, identify as Chinese American. In our culture, one of the traditions that are upheld when a baby turns one is this game called Zhuazhou, which essentially translates to getting, like grasping something, and essentially an array of items, whether it be a pen, something of technology, is laid in front of the baby. So each item sort of represents a career field. And the 1-year-old child who doesn't exactly have a grasp of the world yet has to essentially crawl to one of those items and grasp them. So as if it were sort of a calling to, whatever the career they are interested in. So coincidentally, I was like crawling and I somehow got a pen / pencil or a paintbrush, one of the sort, and I would say that's like my first, I guess, initial interest of art, because that essentially grasping the pen was coincidentally a representation of the things I would do in the future, and that was, I guess, the initial start. But in actuality, when I was in kindergarten to first grade, when I was 4 or 5, I attended this, or I started to attend this fine art school called US Fine Art, shout out, and in Temple City, and ever since then I had been, I guess, sort of trained there for fine arts and for a lot of the traditional like Chinese methods of painting, etc. And that I think really started and piqued my interest in the arts.
Can you talk more about your interest for international relations?
Yeah, absolutely. So international relations and global issues in that entire sphere really began, my interest really began in, I'd say, the seventh grade, in which I had just essentially wanted to, like, I just quote unquote finalized my dream of becoming a cardiologist, but I joined my school's Model United Nations team, which middle school is like a generally relatively young age, but Model UN like literally opened my eyes into a myriad of different global issues. And the first one, and especially, my first conference was actually in Japan.
Oh, wow.
Super, yeah, it was a super unique experience, and I realized how that was really my passion, that being able to collaborate, being able to focus less on the quote like awards at the end, but more of the actual process of research, finding solutions, um, feasible solutions was something that I wanted to do in the future. And I remember the first time giving the speech as representing the Philippines in a Japanese school, and I always hold that memory really much to heart. Um,
Yeah.
and over time, I think Model UN really applies to a lot of different students, especially in the U.S. On really introducing people to global issues. But I think, like, for me, it definitely was, I guess, mind blowing aspect, and I basically was like, all right, I'm so sorry, but I realized that I'm not. My forte is not in science, it's not in STEM, as much as I really do respect the field. And international relations, global issues have become, the forefront of what I wanted to do in the future.
That's very, very amazing. I'd say I had like a failed Model UN career. I did it for a couple months and then I stopped doing it. I personally enjoyed it a lot. And I do understand sort of how it sort of opens this whole new world of like you're putting yourself out there and learning about all these other issues that are going on in the world. And then it's also good for me for like public speaking and writing and research. And I think those skills are also skills that you can sort of apply to other aspects of like your academics and stuff. But I got a little too busy. But I anyone who does Model UN, I know how hard it is, and I know how very interesting it is. So I sort of applaud you for doing it, and I think it's so cool. So, what exactly is the connection between international relations and the visual arts?
Yeah, great question. So that was an intersection I think I was trying to find definitely after I was introduced to Model UN. And it was, I think, the beginning of high school in which I was really lost in terms of like finding ideas and generally, starting this entire journey of, wanting to create something, wanting to utilize both of my passions, but really having a hard time doing so. Um, but I think I think over time I realized, the connection between international relations and visual arts, creative arts, or honestly, any two things is either one of application or one of, combination, if that makes sense. So like you can apply international relations to creative arts, but you can also, apply creative arts to international relations in a sense where like a lot of the solutions, etc., are artistically inclined. They have cultural and artistic meanings behind, what for example, like what geopolitics really are. So I think, there's that way in which you could connect the two. But I think for me, it was more of a combination of both. You know, both seeing how you can use visual arts as a platform for social good and to really highlight these international issues, but also within the sphere of like politics, of international politics, seeing how you can apply visual arts, creative arts as a solution, as a resolution towards a global or maybe domestic issue. And I think there are so many, I think for, at least for advocacy, where, you know, art needs that kind of advocacy for these global issues, it's more of, it does take both, in which, you know, both international relations and the creative arts are very much inclined. And I think especially for the creative arts, a lot of artists behind their art, again, there is a story, and a lot of these stories, you know, point to what is happening currently in society or globally. And I think that especially is likely one of the biggest and
Yeah.
creative, yeah.
So like I said in the beginning, I heard your speech at Gen Z GirlCon. And you spoke in the section on women times activism. So I guess, have you always considered yourself to be an activist? And how can we as teens become activists?
Yeah, absolutely. So activism takes so many different forms, and I think at heart we are all activists because we all have something, whether how no matter how small the no matter if it's, you know, even something that might not be a social issue, we all have something that we advocate for, or just advocate to support. And I think for me, the term activist, I guess, is um, consists a lot of different things, but for me, have I I would say I didn't consider myself an activist like when I didn't understand how like much activism applied to my life. But now that I, you know, think of it, I'd always been an activist. There had always been something in my heart, in my mind, that I advocated for, whether it be for the arts, for arts equity, for like water sanitation globally. There'd or even, you know, in like locally, like for like a generally for a better world. I think that's that mentality, that having that in your heart is always something any activist has. And you know, everyone has that capability. Every student, no matter how you identify, has, I think, that mentality within themselves, advocating for something they're passionate about. And in terms of, you know, how to really fire that fuel, I think there's so many different ways, right? I think in terms of really getting started, I think a big part of it is introspection, really asking yourself, you know, what truly are you passionate about? What makes you so frustrated to the point where you truly want to do something? And that really can be anything. That can be, for example, like if your computer is broken, and that makes you very mad, then, you know, you truly want to do things and find solutions in a way that maybe not necessarily fixes it in the same way that you know, it appeared, but somehow to alleviate the situation. And I think just really thinking of those issues, of whatever makes you, whether it's locally or internationally, incredibly fired up and passionate to make change. I think that is always the start. And going off of that, you know, there's not like a step-by-step process, but I think once you have that, you know, it's important to really do your research and hone in on, you know, aside from like your passions, the passions of others, and what has been done, what research has been enacted, and I'm really finding, you know, what's missing, whether it be the youth voice, Gen Z's voice. And I'm very much appreciative of, you know, this podcast really highlighting Gen Z voices, or something else. I think it's incredibly important to mix, you know, introspection, but also the research element together. And I think, you know, that really, and just being in support of yourself, believing in yourself, that you can enact change, because you absolutely can.
I guess relating back to your computer, um, I am very frustrated by my computer right now because it's doing that thing where it's like making that like sort of noise, like blowing noise. I don't know. So I apologize to the audience if the audio quality is a little bit bad, but I'm gonna definitely do something about my computer after this. Why do you believe activism is a part of international relations?
Well, that is a very great question. I will say activism applies to a lot of different things. I think for international relations in particular, um, international relations is a very interdisciplinary sphere in which you have a lot of people interested in global issues or maybe diplomacy that relates from country to country. But I think particularly in activism, what uh, a lot of the goals in international relations is to um, find that relation, find that connection between, whether between two countries or more, um, or towards a solution. I think a lot of people within the international relations field are trying to find those resolutions, and I think where activism plays in is really advocating for that solution. Within activism, there's art activism, for example, ARTivism, in which there's a term. A lot of people, are trying to find solutions, artists in a way, towards activism and towards the issues that are very prevalent in international relations. So even though I'd say, activism and like finding resolutions might have like a lot of different contrasts, I think, that mindset of advocating for a solution, for a goal, is always something that connects both activism to the global issues sphere.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess one of my focuses for today's episode is how activism, how advocating for things and entrepreneurship sort of intersect. So can you talk more about this intersection?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think ArtVocacy is a very it is a platform to really start that off. So I am a person that loves finding connections and intersections between many things. Uh, and I think part of that like lies in being an only child and really just pretending, um, finding those like invisible connections in a way. And I think, that
Yeah.
connection and is something that each person finds themselves. And for me, it started from that, fuel of wanting to do something with my art, wanting to make a difference from towards the international relations issues that I so very much researched through a more creative aspect, creative lens. And, I think how that all ties into entrepreneurship really begins with what happens once you decide to take that action. So I decided, for example, to launch an organization toward, because I know there are so many different artists, advocates all over the world, art advocates who want to advocate through a more creative and a more overlooked method. I think for ArtVocacy, that's one of the major parts, really connecting and really building a community of artists who want to do that. And the entrepreneurship part comes in through wanting, I think, to make a difference, but also taking tangible steps to achieve that. So ArtVocacy, serves as a nonprofit organization, which that itself, being a nonprofit, is essentially taking a lot of entrepreneurial spirit and and um, I think with ArtVocacy in particular, where that where that intersection comes in is, social entrepreneurship. And there's many social entrepreneurs that you might have interviewed as well, that combined um, their passion for whatever societal issue is happening in the world with, starting a nonprofit organization, or even starting a podcast. Like this exactly is, such an amazing social entrepreneurial venture. um, I think where like that's social entrepreneurship really is where, I think all those intersections of global issues of, but also, uh, things like the arts and things like, really trying to find out how an organization itself operates. I think that's where it all, intersects. And I really encourage, any viewers out there, not only to check out ArtVocacy about, to learn more about social entrepreneurship, but also, introspect yourself on, what issues like matter to you, and how like to take action from that, and like really about social entrepreneurship, which you can just Google essentially. Itself, you can learn so much.
Yeah, so I guess you were sort of alluding to this, but not everyone, they can take a passion and they can turn it into an organization. So for the audience out there, for people who have, they have a passion, what were the steps that you took to create ArtVocacy? And I guess what was your process to sort of kickstart or like start ArtVocacy?
Yeah, great question. All of these questions are amazing. So I will say, I this might sound a bit vague, but the introspection part is really important, and it's super key to understanding um, why you want to start a nonprofit organization. Or, it doesn't even have to be an organization. It can be, there's so many like creative ventures that all count, as social entrepreneurship, and really making a change. So in like, or an organization is one of them, but I really want to emphasize, the element of thinking yourself and researching, and really, I think, understanding your values. What values are important to you, and what values do you want to, emphasize in the world. I think a lot of organizations, out there, are, especially, youth led, are incredibly amazing. They have done a lot of work, though I think, it's always, I think a lot of students might, who have these passions, might get into, the mindset like, oh, but I, like, for example, college, like getting into college, like what if I want to create a nonprofit organization because of that, and I like want to just emphasize, to start off any organization, like just get rid of that mentality, because what you are doing, the values that you have, absolutely are meant for something more. And it is not, post-secondary institutions that are changing the world, but rather you. So I think, in that mentality, I think it's always important to start off with, and how I started off was, really, honing in on like what difference I wanted to make in the world, and specifically like what experiences, like for me it's art, for me it's Model UN, that tied into the values that I wanted to, put out there. And I think, like going off of that into the more tangible steps, um, I think, that research element, that introspection, again, it's so very important. But like afterwards, a lot of it is, building a strong foundation. And for
Yeah.
advocacy, I actually had, the honor to, be, to enroll in an innovation capstone class at my high school, in which, there, like essentially we had an advisor that, oh, sorry, had an advisor that, how kind of guided us throughout, the, like what entrepreneurial ventures that we went through. So I think I credit a lot of, the preparation to that. And a lot of that was understanding, what entrepreneurship really was. And like, rather than, advisors like telling us exactly what to do. It was more of, us trying to research and figure out ourselves, like what goes into an organization. Like so you have your mission statement, you have, what after introspection, like what you truly want to do and your values that you can always return to, and sometimes change. But you also have, afterwards, like what specifically is a part of a nonprofit, whether it's, applying for 501c3 status, whether it's, like finding a team, whether it's like what exactly like workshops or anything that you want to do. I think like those questions and those trying to find those and hone those ideas onto like one structure, I think is one of the next steps that I took, and I think a lot of nonprofit founders out there took as well. And like afterwards, I think there's a myriad of steps you could take. Whether it's finding the right people to work with, finding really building a team to help you, and like I really emphasize the team building part because as someone who does like to do a lot of things like myself, it's so important to delegate tasks. And I think that stuff of the process might be one of the most challenging ones. There's so many amazing people out there you want to work with, but it's about finding like the right people with your vision as well. So I think like afterwards, like finding those people, whether it be on social media, and I really emphasize social media because like hopefully everyone's staying safe, but we are in a pandemic at the moment, and online interaction is so vital. So whether it's through just starting an Instagram page, which can gain a lot of traction, just doing so, or maybe starting like a website, and there's a lot of website builders out there you can use. I think those are I would say like tangible steps into your
For sure.
and I think like from there, that's essentially where you take into excuse me, all of the factors of like your values, of what really matters to you and your mission of your nonprofit or whatever venture that you're involved in, and really taking that into another step, into something more, working with the people that are just as passionate as you are. And yeah, there's so many there's so many pathways you can take.
Yeah, there are. I think that was a great sort of overall gist of like the different steps that you can take, and I've taken a lot of the similar
Yeah.
steps as well. Experienced some of the same issues. I like to work by myself too, but then delegating tasks to other people and finding people who have the same work ethic and same values as you is also a very big, it's very helpful, but also it's great to interact with them as well. So yeah. I think a big part of ArtVocacy is this concept of ARTivism. So could you talk more about ARTivism?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is I like there's so much history behind ArtIvism that I probably can't condense into this like just a few minutes, but ArtIvism combines art and activism. And there's a lot of ways to interpret that, but for me, it's really applying, what you want to advocate for through art. So a lot of the, expressions that people have creatively are because of are towards advocating for an issue that they really care about. And for example, like over the summer, one of the galleries that we had was Identity in the Modern World, that really aims to highlight BIPOC voices. And a big part of that was a lot of youth artists really advocating, for those stories through their art style, whether it be drawing or creating music, like a lot of different ways of expression that words necessarily can't portray. And I think that's one of the really like one of the key pillars of ARTivism really is activism in a more creative way. Excuse me. And I think the history of it really ties back into a lot of different things. I think one of the main, I think one of the main sources of ARTivism, it was, these social movements. Through
Yeah,
like definitely, in U.S. history, like the 60s, 70s, 80s, in which, a lot of these social issues started to arise, whether it be environmentalism, etc. I think um, a lot of artists then where like jazz and similar, art ventures were on the rise, really wanted to highlight these social issues um, that a lot of, I guess, like, for example, newspapers and media overlooked. And I think, these, like, there's so much like research involved with this, but I think these movements, these social movements, and one of which we're going through right now, is one of the major keys towards, advocating and acting through art. And there's, I think, like, there's a lot of different aspects into being an artist. I think for a lot of people, it's commissioning, it's like selling their art for a greater cause, sending proceeds to other nonprofit organizations, but also, really really wanting to emphasize a specific voice. And one of the artists that I really like admire at heart is the Feminist Five. They are a group of artists from China, and they actually, in a couple years past, they were actually arrested by creating art and distributing artworks that, or stickers really, that were in support of female reproductive rights. And that was generally I'd say, taboo topic, but ultimately, like, there was an entire movement surrounding that hashtag Free the Five, that really emphasized, how powerful artivism really is. So I think, artivism itself is a movement that is based off of, these social movements and social issues that is really emphasized through art and through an expression that transcends a lot of different barriers and languages.
yeah. It's interesting because now I'm thinking about the concept a little more, and like I love going to art museums specifically. I like museums, but I like art museums in particular. And a lot of galleries, they're based off of a social movement or social something that was happening during this time period, and then also something that was maybe happening to the artist personally. And it's sort of, I guess, interesting to see that connection. And like right now, if I just like walk on the streets, I can see all these amazing murals um, for Black Lives Matter on the streets, and it's very impactful. And it also helps people to, I guess, it's helps people sort of take an initiative and research more and educate themselves about these issues that are going on once they see this artwork and stuff. So that's, I think it's a really important term that we all should know about. So I guess pertaining to ArtVocacy, well, in ArtVocacy in particular, what has been your most challenging, what has been your biggest obstacle?
Yes, the challenge question. That's, again, a very great question. I will say for advocacy, one of the biggest challenges, because I think we've been facing like multiple, as any organization, would probably be um, emphasizing the importance of artivism and really the message that we want to get across. I think that's one of the greatest, I guess, like challenges that are always challenging us. Yeah, exactly. But like, nevertheless, something that always pushes us to expand and really look at, what matters.
Yeah. And then on the flip end, what has been your, I guess, biggest accomplishment? What is Artvocacy's impact? Yeah.
Yeah. I'd say the biggest accomplishment, though, would probably be our first one, and that is really not only launching Advocacy, but also uh, this element of exhibitions. And I think, we have exhibitions and galleries are really a core part of Advocacy, and especially, exhibitions highlighting the issues that matter throughout society are, and I'd say one of our biggest accomplishments in terms of exhibitions would be our first gallery, which is Community During Crisis, which coincidentally stood for CDC, which also stands for Center for Control for Disease Control and Prevention, which is it was super interesting to see that. But this gallery in particular, it was our first, and as a gallery, I think was one of like our milestones, and always your first accomplishment, your first initiative that you put out there in the world is always something to credit yourselves for. And for Advocacy, I think a lot of that accomplishment really ties into how a lot of our audience and how a lot of our people who are affected react. And I recall Advocacy from that exhibition, like one of the main issues highlighted that weren't really highlighted on media was how women were disproportionately affected, and one of our artworks in this gallery really highlighted that, and how Asian American women in particular. And a lot of the feedback that was received was like, oh wow, I didn't even know that this was an issue that really affected people. And I think that is always an accomplishment, that those small comments, those small realizations of, oh, I learned something from this. I think that's always an accomplishment, and one of the biggest that Advocacy has achieved.
Yeah, I'm excited. And I guess sort of going a little more technical here, have you ever found yourself needing financial literacy skills when it comes to Advocacy?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. I think definitely, financial literacy has been something really important for I think all of us, and for me in particular as a founder. And I think a big part of that, is budgeting, and I think that's something like definitely trying to like still figuring out as I grow as a person. But like Advocacy, has having received a grant, like I think there's a lot of effort that has to go into really breaking that down, whether it be like setting a budget over time, but also like thinking about in the in corporation world, like how money plays into that. There's a lot of, I think, financial literacy skills like really much needed there, and I think that's really important to highlight.
Yeah, for sure. Something that I want to talk a little bit more about is the stigma surrounding artists and financial literacy, like finances, and how they're not really, they can't manage their finances.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such an important point. I'm so glad you brought that up. And I really liked I really loved what you said about, artists finding success, what success means to them, because success is such a myriad of measures, especially for artists. And I can definitely talk a bit more about that. So, definitely there's a stigma. There is, I think, overall a stigma surrounding artistry as a career path, and I definitely, as like in within at least my like Chinese American culture, like there might be like this mentality to um, stay away from like the arts and the culture, because that quote unquote doesn't give you financial stability. It's like really emphasizing, I think there's an emphasis in our culture to like really, or at least in my, like sometimes in my family, what I realized to really focus more on, the paths like becoming a doctor or a lawyer, etc. That has, I guess, like in which you can like both apply like financial literacy in a way more clearer way, but also, are more financially stable. I think there's a stigma surrounding that as well, and I think both of those stigmas definitely connect. And I think a lot of I think also a lot of a big part of that, and really feeding into that stigma is honestly because there are a lot of art budgeting cuts. I think, this is kind of like going off of that. A lot of artists, I think the reason why like there is that stigma of finance is because of, when we're younger, even though, there are like arts programs, a lot of these programs are being cut, and like cut from the government, cut as like unimportant, and not receiving like financial aid. I think that itself that itself really discourages, a lot of future potential prospective artists who really want a career out of that, but also, feeds into that stigma of, okay, art isn't as important, art doesn't need, financial backing. So I think the stigma behind, finance and art, definitely ties into also, budgeting cuts, ties into this entire conversation, most importantly, about like what success really means and what art really means. And that's, to me, I think that's way more than, monetary values. I think that ties into, what difference art can make, as just in itself, just as a raw and passionate form of expression.
Yeah, that was very amazing, everything that you just said. And I guess finally, why do we as teens need to be financially literate?
Yeah, absolutely. So that is such an important question. I think that's something a lot of teens don't necessarily think of, as of now, because like a lot of our finances are either taken care of, by like our guardians, or just something, necessarily we don't have to think about, especially for like people in privileged communities, right? Um, but us as teens need to be financially literate because of the fact that we are not going to be teens all the time. And while we have, I guess that, teen spirit, being financially literate doesn't just mean, us ourselves, like understanding how money works, but also, understanding how society works and how.
That's exactly what I've been trying to do with Wi-Fi Matters. Oh my God. We've literally just said our mission statement there. Because at the beginning of Wi-Fi Matters, I was focusing more on personal finance, and I was like, I want to talk more about the social issues that are going on as well, and how that relates to finances. And you have to be aware of gender inequality in terms of the gender pay gap, racial inequality in terms of the racial wealth gap. You have to be aware that the economy is down. You have to be aware, why is the economy not working? What's going on in these governments and all of these different things. And I'm so happy that you just said that. I'm like smiling so much right here. The audience can't see it, but you can. But yeah, for sure. And I applaud everything you just said. So yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I guess lastly, how can we support ArtVocacy, and how can we become involved with ArtVocacy?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for asking that question. And first and foremost, thank you so much for this very much enticing conversation. And I loved how finance tied into everything. For ArtVocacy in particular, honestly, any support is support. And I think you can always stay tuned on our Instagram page, on our website, in which I can definitely list the handles below, or wherever.
Thank you so much, Angela. This was an amazing conversation, and I learned so much, and I hope the audience did as well.
Thank you so much.
So that's the end of the interview, and I loved listening to all that Angela had to say. In the world of activism and advocacy and art and entrepreneurship, she truly is a force to be reckoned with. I hope you now understand how advocacy can be used in entrepreneurship, and how entrepreneurship is a huge part of advocacy, and how you can change the world through innovations or organizations, or starting a small business, or even a nonprofit. ArtVocacy will be in the episode description, and if you're interested in submitting an artwork for them on a social issue, that would be super cool. Also, go check out this week's Voices post by Mariana from Athens, Greece. She writes about the Greek economic crisis and how it has sort of shaped how Greek teens think and spend their money. It's super interesting, and please read it on our website at www.wifimatters.com. Once again, thank you all so much for listening, and I can't wait to talk to you guys next time.